Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi. Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Bava Metzia Daf Yutet Bava Metzia 19. We're going to start on the bottom of 18b, the last line. And we're discussing how you can recognize if a document is yours or not. And one of the ways is through simanim, through a sign. So, hold on one second. So, in that context, Gemara says, Rabbi Chana Irkas Lagita Be Midrasha. Rabbi Chana lost the get in the base medrash. Rashi says he was an agent to bring the get. Amar Isi Mana Isla Begave. Itivius Eina Isla Begave. He says if you require a siman on it, a sign on it, which is going to be the subject, God willing, of Parak Bava Metzia, which will start on Wednesday or Tuesday night, he says if you require a sign, then I have a sign for it. Here, take a Gemara there. We're in 19a guy, Boker Tov. He says, if you require a sign, I have a sign for it. If you require a recognition, saying that I recognize the signatures, I recognize the scribes, handwriting, well, Isli B'Gave, I have that too. I drew an anyway. They returned the document to him. So Amar Lo Yadani says, I don't know. Rabbi Archana said, I don't know why they returned it. Imishim Tvius Eina, Drew Nile, Vidav Ketsur Mirabanan of Inish to Amalo. I don't know why. I don't know why they returned to me, because Savri Simonity arises, because I think that the concept of relying upon a sign to support a document as being yours is biblical, or because they say that the concept that you can recognize the handwriting and the signatures of the witnesses, that's also called Tvius Eine, and that we rely upon. And that's only because I was a young rabbinic scholar, but a regular person, we wouldn't rely upon it. So, Gemara now says, let's go back to a statement we had before. Gufa, Matzah get Isha B'Shuk. Let's say you find a bill of divorce in the marketplace. It says Reuben is divorcing Sarah. Bisman Shabbat mode. Let's say the husband admits, yeah, I wrote this divorce. Yachzir Isha. You give it to the woman. Ain't about mode, but if the husband doesn't admit, well, Yachzir, what was that? The husband doesn't admit, you don't return to either one. But now we say from here, Bisman Shabbat mode, Mia Yachzir. But in a time where the husband admits, you will return it to the woman, Isha. So if the husband admits that he wrote this get, you return it to her. But why? Betsy says on the divorce, I'm divorcing you on one of Nisan, but then he didn't actually give her the document until 6 months later, until the 1st of Tishrei. And in the meantime, the husband, while they're married, the husband has the right to the fruits of her property. It's called the Nichse Malug. So the fruits of the property that she comes in and designates as Nichse Malug, he has the rights to the fruits of that. So that since during this time when she had really divorced her, but she didn't act like she was divorced, that or excuse me, where he had written the bill of divorce, but he didn't actually give it to her yet, so she wasn't really divorced, and he still went and was using her money, and he was selling it as though they were still married. Umafko Agita because of Nisan. And now she's going to produce the get that was written in Nisan, even though it wasn't given to her. And she'll come and take the money back from the purchasers, or take the property back from the purchasers, and that will be wrong, because really she wasn't divorced until Tishrei, and she's going to go and seize it on the basis of this document, which wasn't actually given to her. So now the Gemara says, well, Amar. This question is not a question according to the one who says Kivan Shanasan Einav Lagarsha, that once the husband decides to divorce her, Shuvin Balperos, that he lost his right to the fruits of the Nechse property. Then it makes sense, Shapir. So then of course you can return it, because even if she seizes the money, he didn't have the right to it. But according to the one who says that he's entitled to the fruits until he actually gives the get, Michael Maimer, well, why would you return it to her on the basis of his admission? She can end up seizing the property improperly. So Kiyasi Lamitraf, so the Gemara says, well, no, because when she comes to take the money, Amrina law, we say to her, I see Raya Emas Mata Getel Yadcha. It's not enough for you to just walk in with the document. You have to prove when you got the document into your hands. So until you can prove when you got the document into your hands, we're not going to give you back the Nichse Muluk fruits that were sold to the purchasers. So the Gemara says, well, how is this different from an IOU in general, from a note in general? The Tanan, we learned, let's say you find a note, if you find this note, and the note has a guarantee on it, meaning to say you find this note that Reuven owes Shimon $100, and Reuven's property is guaranteed on it. So, we're not going to give this note to Shimon if the property is guaranteed, because then maybe they could be in cahoots. And we said that when do we say this? That when Reuven Metzia owes the $100, we still don't return it to Shimon. Because maybe he borrowed, because maybe it's written to borrow Nisan, but he didn't borrow in Tishrei. And now Shimon has this note, and he's going to go and take the money from the purchasers of Reuven's property improperly. Gemara says, but there too, why don't we say Asam Namili there? Why don't we return it? And when Shimon comes to seize the property from the purchasers of the Reuven's assets, namely, why don't we say to him, I see Raya Emas Matashtachov Yadach. You bring me a proof when you actually lent the money. And so just like we say by the divorce. The Gemara says, no, it's not the same thing. Amrei hacha gabe get isha aslo keach v'tava. So the Gemara explains, no, here in this case, by the divorce, when the purchaser comes and makes a claim against her, Amar Haida Juanele Rabbanu Gita, he would the reason why we say you have to bring the proof is Mishum Duotagin, the Taser, because we're worried that if the rabbis want to give her the get, she'd be a guna. She'd sit there married to a chain marriage, and we don't like it. So therefore, mitraf. But now that she wants to not only get the get, she wants to go and claim the money that she's entitled to from the purchasers. Then she has to go and bring a proof when she actually got it. So that's the idea. But here, with respect to a note, the purchaser wouldn't come and make a claim, because he would say, because he'll say from the fact that the rabbis returned this note to him, Pshita, it's obvious that why did they return it? Only because they wanted the lender to be able to seize the assets. So it's clear that the rabbis are establishing it, and therefore, and he's going to say, before I purchased this, that the lender had no ability to collect it. This Gemara is more verbose than typically the Gemaras are, and commentaries, the Rishonim explain that this Gemara was probably added on by Rabbi Yehudai Gaon or other Gaonim later on, writing a couple hundred years after the actual conclusion of the Gemara as we know it. Shechrure Avadim. So if you find a document of emancipation in of a servant, you do not return it to him, because maybe the person wrote it and then changed his mind. If you find this document of emancipation in the marketplace, when the master admits, yeah, he intended to give it to him, return it to the slave. When the slave does not admit, when the master does not admit, then you don't return it. You don't return to either one. But when the master admits that he wrote this document, we're going to return it. Maya asks tomorrow, why are you able to return it? Why aren't we concerned that the master wrote the document in Nisan, but didn't give it to him until Tishrei, about 6 months later? V'azol harav v'zamninu v'azol avda v'kanan nechasim in Nisan Tishrei, and then the slave went out and purchased things during that 6 month period. So really, it doesn't belong to the slave yet because the master really owns the assets until such time as he gave him the thing. And then the master goes along and sells them. And then the slave produces a document of emancipation, Kasav ben Nisan, and he claims he was given it in Nisan because that's when it was written. So now he's going to use this document to go and seize assets that he claims are his that the master sold before he really was emancipated. Now, there's a dispute in tractate. There's a dispute in tractate Gittin whether we say that the slave wants to be free. This is a machokas of Maseches Gittin because not every slave wants to be free. Some of them prefer to be subjects of a master. So according to one who says according to one who says that the slave wants to go free, and when this is signed the document, they're acquiring it on behalf of the slave, and so therefore the slave, even though the slave didn't receive the document until Tishrei, once it was signed in Nisan, he's automatically free. So then this makes sense that you're able to return it to him. Shapir. But according to one who says the slave doesn't want to go free, it's considered an obligation. He'd rather be enslaved. And so therefore, he actually doesn't get the document until Tishrei. So why are you able to? So according to that question, if the master admits to it, why are you able to return it to the slave? The slave is now going to have this document, and he could claim that he got it in Nisan, which is improper. So the Gemara says, the Gemara explains, no, when he comes to seize the money, just like by a divorce, we say to him, give us a proof when the document came into your hands. Now we go up to the next sugya. It says daitiki. A daitiki is what's called a will, and then there's a matana, a gift. So the Gemara explains, what is a daitiki? Date umekam uyos shem meis nechosav uponi. Matana kosher kasabu me'ayom ha'achamisa. So what's a daitiki? It says this will be the law. Uyos. He's basically establishing a document. Shem meis, that if this person dies, nechasav uponi, that after he dies, all of his assets will go to this person, to let's say to Ruvain. And matana, what's a matana? What's a gift? Kosher kasav bo. The matana means, and here we're talking about the daitiki is basically a document that's written on the person's while he's very sick, and it's called a shchivmira. And we're giving him the ability to give away his gift, to do a document when he, as though he says that even though it wasn't established in the full court. And then there's the matana, which is the matana of a healthy person. And basically what he's saying is part of this gift, misa. He's saying you're going to own this property from now on, but you have no permission to its fruits or to sell it until after I die. So this is, and also a shchivmira's document is also, he's able to retract the document if he gets healthy. That's the concept called the shchivmira. So Alma, we see from here that with respect to a gift, that when do we say that a person is acquiring this gift that he puts in the document? Only if he writes from today and after the death. That's what he acquires it. So you might say, if he doesn't do that, he doesn't acquire it. For sure, if he's giving to him right now, he should acquire it. So Amar Abai Achik Amar. So the Gemara says, this is what our Mishnah is saying. Ezu matana spari. What's a gift of a healthy person? Shehi matana shlivmara, which has the same law as the gift of a shlivmara. that basically you don't really have the rights to it right now. What is that law? The lokani el acharmi, so that you really only acquire it after the person dies. Kol shekaseh b'omei hayom acharmi. So where they write that clause in, you can write any clause in. It's just that we assume that clause is automatic when it's a shliv merah, but when it's a healthy person, you have to write that in. So therefore, the Gemara says, Taima duo amar tenu. Now, what's the reason why we say that you don't give this to the person if you find these documents? Because the person didn't say give it. That Reuben didn't say give it to Shimon. Ha amar tenu. But if he would say tenu, nosnin. But if the gifter would say give it, then we would give it. But why is that the case? Didn't we learn viraminu? Don't we learn in the brisa? Matzah daitakos apotukios umatanos. Let's say you find these documents called the daitakos, the apotukios, which is a designated piece of property, or these matanos, these gifts. Even though both admit that this was their documents, we're not going to return it. Why aren't we returning it under these circumstances? Rashi explains. And the Gemara is going to explain also, because let's say you have Reuben's giving $1 million to Shimon on 1st of Nisan, or let's say he's giving a property, an apartment worth $1 million, and Shimon never actually took it. And then Reuben says, you know what, I don't want to give my property to Shimon, I changed my mind. He got me upset. And he says, I'm giving it to Levi. And then Levi comes along and takes the takes the contract and he acquires the property. But now Reuben says, you know what, I changed my mind. I want to give it to Shimon. I don't want to give it to Levi. And so he now has this document and he can go to the court and say, look, I have this earlier document we just found on the street and I intended to give it to it was given to Shimon. And this is prior to the third one. And so therefore, that's the reason it says, well, maybe they're in cahoots. Maybe they're just trying to keep the they don't want the property to go to a third party. So we won't believe it. So why do you say in this case that if the guy says, give the document, give the gift to that person, you would give it? So it says, Rabbi Abba Bar Mamalo Pasha, it's not a difficulty. We're on the top of 19b. Abba Bari, Abba Shlibmira. The Bryson that says that you don't return it, that's talking about a healthy person. And so therefore we look at it since it doesn't say that he wrote it while he was sick, and so therefore we're not going to trust it. But a document of a shlimra is a special dispensation that we're going to give it, that if he says give it, we give it. Masnis in the Katani, our Mishnah, which states Amar Tnu knows the Mishlimra, the Bar Mahadarhu. So the document that states that from our Mishnah that says, oh, if he said to give it, that will be referring to this Shlimra document, because he's always able to recant on the Shlimra. If he gets healthy, he can recant on it. And so therefore, now that he's healthy, we could say he intended to give it to whoever he give it. Because we say, and this is the way the Gemara fleshes out this language, that's why many Rishonim say it's a later addition, because we say, because we say, what could possibly, what do we have to be concerned about? Maybe the concern was that Reuben wrote it initially to Shimon, and then anyway, but then he changed his mind and didn't give it. And then he wrote it to Levi and gave it to him. And now he changes his mind, and he says, I don't want to give it to Levi. Now, even Matanas Bari Yavile, if we're going to say that maybe after he wrote the document while he was sick to the first person, and then he changed his mind, then he gave it as a healthy person to the second one, then the second person is not losing anything. Because in that case, the second one person really gets it. Because he changed his mind from the first one. And and if we'll say that he was a gift to a sick person while he was sick, only while if he gave to the second person only while he was sick, there's also not going to be anything wrong. The Basrais is Zacha, the Kahadar Mikamaisa. There too, the second person should get it. So in the case where he was initially so that which we say from the Mishnah, where if he says to give it, that was talking about a case where he had initially given it when he was sick. But that which we say in the Brisa, that Alpha Pishal Shneim Modem will Yachzer or Zev, we don't give it to either one. But Bari, that's talking about a healthy person. A healthy person can't recant his gift. Because we have to be concerned that maybe he wrote initially to this person whose name was in it the first time, i.e., Reuven wrote it to Shimon, and Imlach for Yavile, and then he changed his mind. And then he wrote it to Levi. And now he wants to change his mind from giving it to Levi. But he says, "Oh, I can't recant." Amar, who I'll say to them, the Analahai, I'll say I gave it to number 2. Vinihidru Nilek Sava. And then the court will give him back the second document. So that when the first person takes out his earlier dated document, he'll get it. So therefore, under that case, if he was healthy, we say Amrinaway Anan, we say to him, Anan hai ksava lo yavinu lahai. We're not going to give to you the document that Reuben wrote for Shimon. Maybe you wrote it, but me anyway, but you didn't give it to him. You have to in a shachrina, you give it to somebody else. And now you're changing your mind. Now, you have to in a shachrina. If you really didn't give it to a third party, I'll tell you what to do. So therefore, if you want to give it to him, write from a new document. And give it to him. That if you gave it to another person, you won't have any loss to Kadam Zachi, because he'll come along and take it because his document will be prior to the new document that Reuben is giving to Shimon. So the Gemara says, Maska for Rav Zid, the Rav Zid challenges this. But how can you say that one is talking about a sick person, one's talking about a healthy person? Both the Tana says Daitakos, which is the document of a sick person. So how can you say the Bryce is talking about a healthy person? So both of them are talking about a sick person writing the document. Why in one case would you give it if he says it, and in the other case you didn't? Now the case where we say to give it, that would be a reference to where he himself said it. That he said that he wrote this document while he was still alive, and he is still alive. And now he says he wants to give it to this person, and you could give it. And the other case which says you don't give it, if he says give it, that's where the person died, and the son is the one who's saying to give it. Masnisin the kamar tenu nosnin, our Mishnah, which says that if he says to give it, we give it. That's b'didei. That's where the person himself who wrote it, the bar mehaderhu, because if he wanted to, he could always recant this document that he said as a shlivmara. Because we say if indeed he gave another document to a third party, the second person is not going to lose really if we give the document back to Shimon, because the Kama Ubasra, Basra Zachi, because when they both go before the court, and one of them has the earlier dated contract, and that's just Shivmara, and the second one has the later dated contract, the Basra Zachi, the one who had this document dated later, is going to still be able to claim it. Because it says by the fact that I have this document, that proves he changes his mind from what he decided to give as a Shivmara. Because a Shivmara document, you can undo, because we say that he only wrote it while he was in a state of duress because he thought he was about to die. When there's a latter case, say in the Brisa, That's Bebrei. That's where do we say you don't return? That's where the son makes the claim. Maybe the father wrote to this person. And and then he changed his mind and didn't give it to him. And then, and after his father died, the son gave it to the third party, and he gave it to him. Now the son wants to change his mind. But he says they won't let me change my mind. I'll say to them that my father gave it to this person. And because and therefore I'll make this claim, and I will go with the first one. V'nafik minay will take away the gift that was given that I gave to the third party, or that my father gave. To Huzachi, that the first one got the gift, v'niflog bade, and I'll split it with him. Hilkach, therefore, Amrinale, we say to the son, Anan we're not going to give this document to Shimon. The Dilma Michtav Kasvei Avua. Maybe your father wrote it to him, but Miav lo Yavile, but never actually give it. You have to in a you gave it to a third party. The Kahadras pay, and maybe now you want to recant. Eloi Kushta Ka'amris Yavle Avuch. If you're saying the truth that your father gave it to him, Zilatasha, you should go now. Write a new contract. The inami lo Yavle Avu, that if your father didn't give it to him, and you wrote this document to another person, then the second won't lose anything, because the kamo bas or kamazachi, because the person, the third, i.e. Levi, you got the document before you wrote it to the new person. So therefore, that's what we would say to make sure. Gemara flashes it out, but it's clearly obvious if you think about it. Okay, so we'll stop the recording here.